One, two, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome, everyone. This is Joe Dager, the host of the Business Design 101 podcast. With me today is Stefanie Jansen. She is the independent co-creator, co-founding the CoCreators in 2012, and the author of the new book, The 7 Principles of Complete Co-Creation. During her psychological studies and career at market research agency IPM Kinwise, she was trained in uncovering customer insight. She has gradually expanded her expertise from market research to co-creation and has applied this to all kinds of organizations, including publishers, countries, NGOs, retailers, and I guess FMCG concerns. What's that? That throws me a little bit what that means. We'll find out. But Stefanie, thanks for joining me.
Well, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, I want to go back just a little because something in your past intrigued me.
Yeah.
How much did your market research into customer insight lay the foundation for your work in co-creation? You know, do you look at it as, was it a necessary step?
Oh, yeah, totally. It is. Co-creation is just the next step in qualitative market research, is how I view it. So with qualitative market research, which I did more than quantitative, you really lay the connection with customers for the companies. And co-creation is you actually bring the customers in direct connection with their customers rather than watching them from a screen or a mirror.
Because I just about think an anthropologist anymore with their research skills is the better marketing person because they're used to uncovering that next step, those things, and digging deep into research. Is there any truth in that?
I think so. They are naturally really curious about everything, and they tend to have an open mind, which is what the best marketers also have. The worst ones don't have an open mind. They are full of hypotheses that they view as truth, and they are just looking to test those hypotheses and confirm them, actually.
Let's define co-creation, because I'm sure a lot of people look at it very differently. And since it's a central theme of the podcast, let's just start there with a definition, maybe.
Well, yeah, that's a good idea. There are many definitions around for co-creation, and they're all a little bit different. And essentially, you're already co-creating when you're two parties creating something. The way we view it is that it's not complete when the end user of the intended solution is not added to that mixture of people who are co-creating. So what often happens is that companies will work together to co-create something new, and they call it co-creation, and you could call it that, but it's not complete because they forget to add the end user to the mix, or they might forget other parties. So for it to be complete, you have to have all relevant parties in the process, and the end user is always a relevant party. Somehow they get overlooked.
We go back to that service-dominant logic thinking. Value is co-created, and value is in the use of the product and service.
Exactly, yeah.
I'm being a lean guy, and I came from, the traditional lean manufacturing. That portion, is very much product-dominant logic thinking, let's say, because it's the idea of better, faster, cheaper. We can make it, and it's actually, what a great way to commoditize a product, right?
Right, yeah.
I've been very good at it. I mean, and lean manufacturing has been very good, so they've been able to stay competitive. To move to that idea, value is co-created, and it doesn't, value doesn't happen until the product is used, is a little foreign to them. I mean, how would you present co-creation to a mindset like that? Is it something you run into?
Oh yeah, I run into that all the time because that's the old way of thinking, and it's still successful. But I believe we're in a paradigm shift where we're shifting from what we call the power paradigm to the co-creation paradigm. And in the power paradigm, it was okay to just send a product into the market and create a market for it, and that way you you were successful. Nowadays, we see more and more that the market actually expects to be a co-creator of the services they use or the products they use. And that is now happening, and it will happen, it will occur more and more. Right now, you can still be successful the old way, but I don't think that will last. Also, because the Generation Y, the young people nowadays, they don't want to work for those companies anymore. So in the end, they will have to change their ways, because the Gen Y, they were raised in participation households, as we call it. So they are used to having a voice, and they really don't want to just be presented with something and accept it the way that is. They want to have an impact and influence. So they, as consumers as well as employees, they expect co-creation.
This idea that we go in and solve problems for customers, I think is gradually going away. I mean, it's the old thing that we don't get invited to the customer decision-making process till 60% is over with. There's certainly some truth to that, because customers are smart enough nowadays to recognize their problems. They're not necessarily looking for us for solutions. They're looking for better ways to implement their solutions.
And they're looking to be part of the solution also.
How did your company, the CoCreators, come about, and how did that segue into the book?
It was really just a website that popped in my head that I claimed, and that was thecocreators.com. And then nothing happened for a while. But I noticed that being an independent market researcher, first I worked for a firm, and then I became independent. And I saw that my clients wanted not a market research report with insights, but they wanted a solution that came directly from the end user, and they wanted to be part of that solution. So I was co-creating more and more. And then that website popped up, and I saw in my mind a small army of co-creators, or people like myself, that could help companies to actually do this themselves rather than hire market research agencies to do it for them. And that was the idea. My business partner, Maarten, and we actually, when I met him, or I met him again, I should say, I met him before on a project where we worked together, and then I met him again at some event. And he was all about co-creation. And together we started the CoCreators. And it is now that little army of people who can help. So, yeah.
Yeah, and what was the genesis of the book then? Did that lead into, I want to put it down in writing to spread the word? How did that lead into your book?
So when we started the CoCreators, we set out to just gather everything that was written on co-creation. And in the end of 2011, when we started, that was not much. And most of it was really theoretical. It was done by very smart people in universities, and it was not very practical. So then actually in 2012, we decided, okay, we'll write a book. And neither of us had ever written a book, and we really underestimated it. So it took 5 years, and by the time it was done, there was more on the market on co-creation, but I still think the book is different from from the other books, because it's really practical, and it offers like a step-by-step approach on how to. It's almost like a self-help book.
It's practically a workbook. I see a variety of people benefiting from it, because it's sort of a management book also, as it is an innovation book. I mean, who did you write it for? Who's your poster child there?
The people that are already interested in co-creation. We didn't write it for the people that are still stuck in the power paradigm and they don't really want to change, but we wrote it for the people who want to change and they don't really know how, or they are seeing a lot of barriers in their work, especially when they're working for traditional corporations. It should help them to actually gain some traction. But it would also be my dream to have people actually study co-creation as a master's degree or something, or a postdoc or whatever, because it would also be a good study book, I think. But there's currently not a real market for that, because there are no co-creation academies yet, but we have claimed that website too, so there will be someday. Yeah, starts with the website.
I'll go to that service dominant logic thinking that Vargo and Lush did and everything back in 2006 or whatever, because that's very much, I think, is kind of some of the roots of co-creation there. And you're right. If anybody's ever read that original work, I mean, that is, it's a research document. It's very difficult to read that academic prose, let's say, okay? Even now, when you look at some of the things written, it is. And I think the people that adapted that are some of the design thinkers and service design thinking.
Yeah.
And how does co-creation and your method or the book kind of complement or is different than service design thinking?
Yeah, that did happen. That was a parallel thing where we were working on our book. Suddenly, this user-centric research and design thinking became big. And we do write a little bit in the book about it, but I think we need to write a separate extra chapter or something, because it is actually complementary the way I see it. So design thinking or agile or user-centric ways of working describe a workflow, and that could be complete co-creation when you add all relevant parties to this flow. But it doesn't have to be. A lot of design thinking projects or cases that I read, they do add the end user, but only in the form of testers. So they are just testing prototypes. And that is not co-creation. Co-creation is when you actually have them co-develop. And that doesn't always happen, but when it does, it is co-creation, and it's co-creation within design thinking, or it's agile co-creation, or it is user-centered co-creation. So you can just add it to those other methods of innovation.
It's really difficult. I mean, when you think about what you're saying there, to have that transparency with a customer, I mean, you really have to kind of lay it out there, don't you?
You do. And that's what's scary for a lot of people. But once you do that, once you actually are transparent and you do that, and you invite them to be the expert that they are the experts of being the end user, then they add so much value that it's really addictive to work that way. But I do see the barrier.
When you get companies involved that start co-creating, what happens with ownership? I mean, does this only work in, let's say, open source projects, or, which is ideal, but how does ownership and who makes the money, okay? What happens there?
Yeah. You can be transparent about ownership too. So you can make agreements about that before you even start, before you even have all the parties around the table. If there is one company that invests more than the others, then they should also be more owner than the others. That would be clear for everybody, and everybody would accept that when you say it that way. Okay. And then again, you have to be transparent. So you say, okay, we have this budget, and they put this in, and they put that in. So that means that they are, in the end, more owner than the others. And the end users that we add, they are not owners. They can just be happy that they can add so they can increase the relevance, but they're not owners. Or you could go really extreme, and I know cases of that too, where everybody is a co-owner of it, and you actually have end users as stakeholders in the end. Sure. But that you can only do with certain types of end users where you're comfortable doing that with children or something.
Yeah, so this isn't something that I meet this guy on the web and tomorrow we're co-creating together, right? There's got to be a little trust involved.
You build the trust throughout the process also. If you are upfront clear about ownership, then trust is still a big issue, but it is a little less of an issue because in the end you know that you are still the owner of what comes out of it. So the other people you hook into the process are just giving input, but they don't run away with your property. You can do that legally, But if you really want to co-create something where everybody is a co-owner, then yeah, you have to build trust. That's really, really important.
You mentioned the lean startup in the book and the idea of a MVP, the minimum viable
Yeah.
product book. But I sometimes think that the MVP is somewhat limiting. It's kind of that product dominant type thinking, that minimum viable product. You put it out there and you push it out there to observe customer use. It's really not. It's something short of co-creation, okay? And you really need as much. It maybe I did a post the other day that I called it really a minimum viable market. Okay, it would be that you really need more so than a minimum viable product, because and I think that's what you're saying in the book, is that it's not good enough to have an idea, develop a product, and put it out there nowadays and stuff and test it. Is that we really have to find a product market fit, and whether you want to call it market product fit, you really, those things need to be done in parallel, not one before the other. They really need to be one in the same practically, and that's what co-creation is sort of about.
Yeah, that's right. And a minimal viable product I would see as a really good test once you co-created something and then you put it out there and that's the best test, because it's a real life experiment to see if what you co-created worked. And then in response to what you learned from the market and the way people behave, buying it or not buying it, you can still adapt it in co-creation with all the relevant parties. So that's how you do that. So the MVP is a test that you could also do a quantitative market research instead of. It's just a different way of working.
Now, you called your book The 7 Principles of Complete Co-Creation. And what I thought was interesting a little bit about the title is the word complete. All right?
Yeah.
How did that enter into the title? Why?
A lot of things are co-creation, like I said before. But they are, when we talked about it, we found they're not complete. They're not, first we said they're not true co-creation, but then we thought, no, they are true co-creation, because when several parties create something, that is per definition co-creation. But we're missing something. We're missing certain parties, and often that's the end user, but it could also be other parties. There's a case in the book where a company created a platform online where people could upload their little jobs that they could do, teenagers. So they could upload, I'm a good babysitter, or I can mow your lawn, or I can wash your car. And that was co-created with the teens. So that platform, once they launched a beta version, the teens were able to find it, and they liked it, and they uploaded a lot of jobs, but nobody took the jobs. And then they hired me. So why is this not working? We co-created and we followed all your rules, and it was, so what did we do wrong? But they forgot to have on the table the other relevant party, which would be the buyers, right? And who's going to hire a babysitter off of a platform that they've never seen before and they don't know, and nobody's going to do that without a certain warranty or something. And the same goes, you're not going to give some guy your car keys just because he posted on the platform that he will wash your car. How can you trust him? So this flopped because they forgot to build in some sort of warranty system for the buyer. And they forgot to actually involve the buyers into this. So they co-created it with the sellers, but not with the buyers. So complete co-creation, yeah, that was your question. It involves all relevant parties. So you really, an important step is to really sit and think, like, who are the important parties, and who could later on be a barrier to success, or who could be a catalyst for success. And all of them should be involved one way or another. Some really intensely and others just on the sideline, but somehow you got to involve them, and then it is complete. And that is where that word came from.
And the thing I think about of co-creation, and this seems to be a lot of fuzziness in the process a little bit, okay? And And that's good. When I see that, I have a tendency to think I need a good project manager to direct this, to
Oh
direct
yeah,
something like this. And is that a key for success in co-creation?
yeah, that is definitely necessary to succeed because otherwise there will be no one will feel responsibility. So people will start enthusiastically and then they will stop or abandon it or just fall back on their old ways of working. So you need someone who has an overview over the process and keeps people to the things they agreed on and documents it. It should be documented somewhere where everybody can see. And that is the co-creator. That is a very important person.
Do you cover that in the book then, the project management side of it?
Yeah, that is in under the principle productive because the principle productive deals with, well, it's only complete if it leads to an actual solution that gets implemented.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's not complete. Then you have abandoned it and it's not complete co-creation. But in order to get there to the implemented solution, you need a co-creator.
How do I get started with a pilot project? And let's say if I read your book, okay, what do I do on Monday morning?
You define a challenge, something that needs to be solved, and it could be anything, but right now it's mostly applied to innovation or product development. But recently I was involved in a job that was scenario development. So it could be really anything. Or you could also think, oh, I want to make my canteen at work better. Something like that. The place where we all eat, the restaurant. So you define a challenge. That's your first step. And then you phrase that challenge into a how question. So how can we improve our work restaurant, for instance, in such a way that everybody feels happy there or healthy or whatever it is that you want to accomplish. That's in the how question. And then you start thinking, okay, who is necessary to solve this how question, to answer it, to find the best solution for it? Who do I need? So you make a list and then you connect with all those parties. So that's quite a long process in the beginning. And that is another barrier because it's much easier to do the old way where you just connect with some people within your own organization and you do a quick brainstorm and there are some solutions and then you implement one of them. It's much quicker. But then the implementation may not be relevant or the chances are that it will flop. So you spend a lot of time in the beginning connecting with all these parties and finding out what they want and what their stakes are. And that way you gain support for your project.
To me, it seems like when you go to the marketplace, you enlist customers, is that you somewhat build a ready-made market for the product as you're developing it. People take ownership of it. They're part of the process, right?
Yeah, it's true. And the cases where we actually did complete co-creation, that is exactly what happened. So product or service we were developing would already be known among a lot of end users. So as soon as it was on market, it got bought or used or whatever it was. And also the other parties that were necessary for its success, like suppliers or experts or whatever, they all supported it and wanted to make it into a success because they were involved and it felt like it was theirs also. So these things became highly successful because of that. But in the beginning, it was a longer, dragging process where we met a lot of resistance that we had to overcome. But in the end, it goes much quicker because everybody has the same vision and they know what to do and they do it. So then, yeah, you have to just get through the first stage and then it becomes fun.
What's the next step? I mean, tell me what's the direction for your company? I mean, where are you going? What opportunities do you hope the book will create?
My personal passion is really to have as many people work in co-creation as possible because I think it will create a better world in the end. We will have more fun working, which already creates a better world because people are happier because they work with purpose. but also it will create products and services that are really valuable rather than just a bunch of junk that gets pushed and then flops, and that creates waste. It will add to a better world. So I hope that the book will offer me opportunities to speak to large crowds of people, but also people will find us through the book and have us help in one way or another. We could coach on a distance. We could do the whole process, but I much rather coach people on the job to become the best co-creator they could be. And then there's the academy, of course. That would be a huge next step.
What's the best place to learn more? Your website, and is there a book website?
Don't have a book website, which we should probably, but right now it's just on our own website. So that's the CoCreators.com. And then there's always that you learn most in face-to-face contact, be it through Skype, what we do now, or real time. If people want to come to Amsterdam, I'll show them around. It's a wonderful city. And you could learn a lot.
I encourage everyone, okay, to take a look at the 7 principles of complete co-creation. I think if anyone follows my blog, okay, and my website, they'll see a lot of similarities from the service dominant logic that's been in there, and the conversion of how I think about marketing research, which I believe it's really action research, as I call it, okay?
Yeah.
Of digging there. So I think this is a great compliment for myself, and I think it takes it another step, because I think you and your co-author, Martin, has done a great job in describing a process and putting it out there for people to understand. So I want to compliment you on that.
Thank you.
And so this podcast will be available in Business 901 iTunes Store and the Business 901 blog site. So I want to thank all the listeners for listening.